So, welcome to my class. In the last class, I talked about the fundamental concepts. These are the fundamental concepts of macroeconomics, right? And these are the building blocks for understanding macroeconomic phenomena and analyzing economic policy and outcomes. So, once you grasp these concepts, you can understand better the complexities that beset any economy. How does an economy actually perform? You can know if you are a little conversant, if you know about these. Okay, so uh, I talked about all of that in the last class, but in this class I'm just going to tell you about, I'm just going to elaborate a little now. What is GDP? So a little bit about each one of them, maybe with a few examples perhaps. So just looking at a country's GDP, or the national income, or the gross domestic product, um, you can sort of know. I mean, it tells you about the health of the economy. Is it robust or is it poor? What of so? Talking about GDP, or the national income, what does it say? GDP, gross domestic product. So let me give some definitions of each of these, and of these fundamental concepts of macroeconomics. So GDP is the total monetary value of the final goods and services produced within a country's border in a specific time period, usually in a financial year or annually. Now, for example, if a country produces, say, rupees 2 trillion worth of goods and services in a year, its GDP is rupees 2 trillion. So, what does a GDP, or the gross domestic product, what does it indicate? It indicates about, or it tells you about, how is the economy performing, where does it stand, and especially if you study it vis-a-vis with other countries, you know exactly where you stand and what are you doing. And talking about the GDP, we know how, is it rich or poor, or I mean, in this we'll also talk about the welfare economics, etc. And but normally or generally, you will know how the economy is performing. So it's a report card sort of thing. So um, now talking about the unemployment rate. Now, what is the unemployment rate? So it measures the percentage of labor force that is unemployed and is actively seeking employment. So they are looking for employment and they are unemployed. They want to be, they need to be employed, they need to earn their living, but they are not being able to get a job that they want, or they're not even getting a job at all. So, for example, if a country has a population of 100 million people, of which 5 million are unemployed and are actively looking for jobs, the unemployment rate would be 5%. So, something like that. Now, talking about inflation rate, again, I'm going to tell you what is inflation. It is too much money chasing too few goods. In simple terms, that is, the rate at which general price level of prices for goods and services is rising, leading to a decrease in purchasing power over a period of time. So in India, you know how we are so fond of gold and we buy gold. So if you just see that 2 years ago, the prices of gold per 10 grams was, say, rupees 38,000. Today in 2024, it is around 58 to 60,000. So the amount is the same. It's a 10 grams. And look at the price level. By how many times it has risen, right? So that is the inflation rate. The good is, the amount is the same, but the price has risen. So, and of course, inflation rate generally, as you must have studied in the um, class 11 in statistics, it is calculated by CPI, that is a consumer price index, and which is based on a basket of goods and services. Um, if the prices of basket of goods and services increases by 2% over course of a year, the inflation rate for that year is 2%. So the third, we come to AD and AS. AD stands for aggregate demand and AS is aggregate supply. Talking about AD, what is aggregate demand? So it represents the total demand for final goods and services in an economy over a given period with a given price level. So if as aggregate demand is a demand, the demand for all the goods, as I mentioned earlier in the previous video, it is from the pin to the warship, the aircraft, whatever you're talking about, the spaceships or whatever, or spin to whatever. So total amount of goods and services, total amount, the demand for total amount of final goods and services in an economy at a given price level, that is aggregate demand. So talking about aggregate supply, now what is that? Of course, the supply of the total amount of goods and services that the producers are willing to supply at a given price level. So that is the aggregate supply. So in a way, it is total output at the price level. So for example, if a consumer confidence increases, leading to higher consumer spending, aggregate demand will rise, potentially leading to an increase in production and employment. So if aggregate demand rises and if producers are also willing to supply at that given price level, there'll be an increase in production and also increase in employment. So let's talk about these business cycles. So what are they like? They go up and down. So there's a recovery, boom, recession, then trough. Again, there is a recovery, boom, and it goes on. These phases keep moving. So these are the fluctuations. We call them the fluctuations in the economy, in the economic activity, that are characterized by periods of expansion. So there is a period of expansion, then peak, as you see this a peak, then the contraction, and absolutely trough, the end. So say talking about, for example, let's just just to make it very clear, just talk about that. During an expansionary phase, businesses are booming. So if the business is booming, what will happen? Yes, you got it right. Unemployment will come down and the gross domestic product will increase. And during recession times, so depression or there's a recession times, this is recovery and this is when you have depression or the recession that is going on, what will happen? Businesses will go down, unemployment will increase, and the gross domestic product or the national income will shrink. Then you have what is known as the trade balances. So, what are the trade balances? They are mainly your exports and imports. Based on that, you calculate the trade balances. So, balance of payment is it's a all inclusive concept which we will be doing in detail, and balance of trade just goes with the goods and services. X denotes export and M denotes imports. They are known as net exports, export minus import. So trade balances represent the differences between the country's exports and imports of goods and services. Okay. Now, if a country exports, say, rupees 500 billion worth goods and imports rupees 400 billion goods, there'll be a trade surplus, right, of rupees 100 billion. So this is how it goes on. And, we will examine also the importance of international trade, the gains because of specialization and comparative advantage of trade and all of that. That is why it is important. Of course, it's not there in your syllabi, but you should know why international trade becomes so important in open economies. Today, we are all open economies. Ancient economics, when we study it in a closed economy, but this is how it works, especially in as we'll do the Indian economy, the practical aspect of macroeconomics, you will come to know where we are. And And also, when we are doing this trade balances, we'll also talk about, we'll discuss exchange rates and their role in facilitating international trade, and it influences economic competition, and we'll analyze the effects of trade policy such as tariffs or trade agreements, etc., on the export and imports of a country. All in all, it's very interesting as you go through these basic concepts. And then now, for when you're talking about, we've got to control the economy. Who controls the economy for economic growth? And you have to have the reins in hands. Okay, so how does the government do it? It has two ways of doing it, and that also we're going to study, especially when you do the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. Now, fiscal policy is a budgetary policy where we're talking about revenue collection, that is taxation, and then we talk about spending, the expenditure of the government. And it is the government policy. For example, now to make it clear, during recession, a government might increase its spending on infrastructure projects to stimulate economic growth, maybe, and to create, say, jobs. So, and what about monetary policy? It is the central bank policy, uh, which it juggles with the interest rate and money supply. It uses these to uh, uh, it here we learn about the interest rates and the money supply, how it uses these two to control the inflation or deflation in the economy. It can control the economic activity in the economy. That is, if inflation rate is rising, a central bank might raise the interest rate to reduce borrowing and spending. So, so this is how, this is what, I mean, we are going to do in macroeconomics. When we do macroeconomics, you will find it is macroeconomics practically. When we do with Indian economy, you will see how the challenges that it faces, how it can control it with the help of the budgetary or the monetary policy and all of that. And you know what's unemployment, and then there is poverty, and you talk about the agriculture sector, the industrial sector, and the policies that you come up with, the new economic policy. And then you can talk about the when we talk about the planning to be done and all of that. Okay, I close on the question. Tell me, what has planning been replaced in India? So post your answers. Let me see. Happy studying, go through it, write down write a question for each of these. For example, what is GDP? What is the unemployment rate? Define inflation rate, define ADAS, etc. Okay.